For 25 years, I wore the badge. I worked with police officers just beginning their careers. I supervised officers carrying enormous responsibility. I worked with police instructors, commanders, executive leadership. I spent years inside police education in one of the largest municipal police departments in this nation. And after all of those years, one thought has stayed with me. Every police officer deserves the very best preparation their organization can provide. Not because it guarantees success, not because it eliminates mistakes, but because of what we ask police officers to do. Every day, we ask human beings to make decisions that may forever change another person's life. Sometimes in seconds, sometimes under stress, sometimes with incomplete information, and sometimes while the entire world watches. That is an extraordinary expectation. If we ask that much of police officers, then institutions have an equally extraordinary responsibility. Notice I didn't say officers have all the responsibility. They absolutely have responsibility, but they should never carry it alone. Policing has always been a partnership. The individual officer has responsibilities. Supervisors have responsibilities. Police instructors, leadership have responsibilities, and the institution itself has responsibilities. Public trust depends on every one of those responsibilities being taken seriously. One of the things I learned during my career is that officers often become the visible face of decisions they never made. Policies, resources, staffing, equipment, organizational priorities, those decisions frequently begin long before an officer ever responds to a call. Yet when something goes wrong, it is often the officer standing in front of the camera or in handcuffs. That reality should never become an excuse, but neither should it prevent us from asking larger questions. Professional organizations should constantly ask themselves whether they are giving their people every reasonable opportunity to succeed. Not simply because lawsuits exist, because people exist, because careers exist, because families exist. Every officer leaves home hoping to return safely. Every family hopes the same. Communities hope the officers serving them are prepared for the complexity they'll encounter. Those hopes are connected. Sometimes discussions about accountability create the impression that supporting officers and examining institutions are opposing ideas. I don't believe they are. In fact, I think they deepen and depend on one another. The stronger an institution becomes, the stronger the officer becomes. The stronger the officer becomes, the stronger public confidence becomes. They are not competing interests. They're shared interest. That is one of the ideas behind police praxis. Not that policing needs more criticism, not that policing needs less accountability, but that policing deserves deeper reflection. Reflection is not weakness. Reflection is professionalism. The best organizations I've ever seen were never afraid to learn. They were never afraid to improve. They never confused experience with completion, because experience should never end learning. It should deepen it. If you've worn the badge for 30 years, you still deserve an organization committed to learning. If you've worn it for 30 days, you deserve the same thing. The responsibility to prepare officers doesn't end at graduation. It continues throughout a career. The profession changes. Communities change. Law changes. Expectations change. Learning has to continue changing too. That's true for officers. It's equally true for institutions. One of the greatest misconceptions in policing is that asking thoughtful questions somehow signals disloyalty. I've come to believe the opposite. Some of the most loyal people I've ever met were the ones willing to ask difficult questions before those questions were asked by someone else. Not because they wanted to embarrass the organization, because they wanted the organization to become stronger. That's not criticism, that's stewardship. Every generation of officers inherits the profession from the generation before them. The question is simple. What are we leaving behind? Are we leaving behind stronger systems, better preparation, greater wisdom, or are we simply leaving behind the same conversations for someone else to have 20 years from now? Those questions matter. Not because they belong in court, not because they belong in politics, because they belong in policing. Police officers deserve institutions that never stop asking how they can better prepare the people they serve. Communities deserve institutions that never stop learning. Leadership deserves conversations that move beyond appearances and toward understanding. And officers deserve to know that when they're asked to shoulder extraordinary responsibility, the institution has done everything reasonably possible to prepare them for it. That's not lowering standards. That's honoring the badge. Police praxis is grounded in a simple belief. The questions that are asked matter. Whether you're representing a plaintiff in a civil rights case, whether you're a police officer beginning your career, whether you're a first-line supervisor, whether you're a chief responsible for an entire organization, or whether you're simply a citizen trying to understand how institutions become stronger. The quality of the questions shape the quality of the answers. That is where police praxis lives. Yes, my work today supports plaintiff-side civil rights litigation. That is the professional path I chose. But the principles behind that reach much further. When the right questions are asked, officers benefit, communities benefit, leaders benefit, and institutions have an opportunity to learn rather than simply defend. That is not about assigning blame. It is about recognizing that accountability and organizational learning are not opposing ideas. At the very least, and at their very best, they strengthen one another. Police praxis exists because I believe thoughtful examination serves everyone touched by policing. Not by beginning with conclusions, but by having the courage to begin with better questions. So whether you're just beginning your career, whether you've spent decades wearing the badge, whether you're retired as I am from policing, or whether you've never worn a badge at all, but care deeply about the future of policing, I hope you'll remember one thought. Professionalism is not measured by whether we believed we're finished learning. Professionalism is measured by whether we remain committed to becoming better for ourselves, for one another, for the profession, and for the public that we've sworn to serve. because in the end, the badge asks an extraordinary amount of the individual. It should ask no less of the institution that stands behind that individual. Every officer deserves to know that when they walk into uncertainty, they were given every reasonable opportunity to succeed. Every supervisor deserves an organization willing to learn alongside them. Every leader deserves conversations that move beyond appearances and toward understanding. And every community deserves confidence that the institutions entrusted with extraordinary authority are equally committed to extraordinary reflection. That's the future I believe policing is capable of achieving, not because perfection is possible, but because progress always is. For 25 years, policing shaped who I became. It taught me discipline. It taught me responsibility. It taught me humility. Most of all, it taught me that public service is never simply about wearing a badge. It's about leaving the profession stronger than you found it. My service to policing did not end when I retired. It simply found a different voice. If these conversations encourage one officer to think differently, one supervisor to ask a better question, one executive to pause before accepting good enough, one attorney to look a little deeper, or one institution to continue learning, then they've accomplished exactly what they were intended to accomplish. Because every improvement in policing begins long before anyone notices it. It begins with someone willing to ask, can we do this better? I believe we can. I believe we should. And I believe that asking thoughtful questions before circumstances force difficult answers is one of the highest forms of service we can offer one another. I'm Tom Loglisci. Thank you for listening to Police Praxis Audio Briefings.